But leaders who lead by fear, and so obviously in the church we go, that didn't work, that's not a good plan. But even in the business world, what happens eventually, if you don't do it the way that I want you to, and I try to manipulate you, and I try to control you, and I try to do all those things, and you are strong enough to stand through all of my abuse, I will realize I can't control you. I can't manipulate you. I can't make you. You're not going to follow my leadership. You know what? Well, then I can't have you here. I have to get rid of you because now you're a threat to me.
Hi, you're listening to Java with Jen with your host, Jenna Lee Samuel. On this show, I bring the simplicity of hearing God's voice into everyday life in a no-nonsense, authentic, and super practical way. With coffee in hand and real life in our faces, let's do this. Hey everybody, thanks so much for coming back to another episode here at Java with Jen. I have a repeat guest with me today, Mr. Allen Chapin. He's been on here a couple times actually, sharing about his books, and he is a wealth of wisdom and a wealth of knowledge. And I got real excited when I found out that he had shared with my husband's school of ministry on this topic. And when he was on my calendar, I was like, Allen, let's talk about this. And we're going to talk about leadership. Well, tell me what you title this message actually.
Yeah, it was leadership by fear, or fear-based leadership, and the subtitle is "and how to avoid it." That's the more important part.
Yes, because if you guys have ever worked under a leader, that part of how you can identify they're a fear-based leader is that it produces fear in your own life, right? Whatever, there's different things that you can look for, and we're going to break that down in this episode. There's 8 points I think that we're going to hit on, and we're going to try to get through all of it. If we don't, there are some resources in the show notes that Allen has made available to you, so that you can get the rest of it. But before we dive in, Allen, I'm meant to tell you about this cool product that I have recently discovered, and it's been a game changer. So you like coffee, right?
Oh, I love coffee.
Okay, right.
Every day.
Every day, all day, right? Well, I actually can only do, I don't know if you knew this, I can only do like 1 cup of coffee a day, maybe 2. But if I do,
weak.
I know, right? I know. I'm like a weenie. So if I do 2 cups of coffee a day for too many days, it jacks me up. I get all dehydrated. It messes up my sleep. It just like really jacks me up.
No way.
I know. So there's this movement where people are getting off of coffee, and it's because coffee caffeine triggers your cortisol and raises your cortisol and makes it harder to manage stress and and your focus only stays present for so long before, again, you need your other second cup of coffee. And so this product is called Magic Mind, and it's like this little 2-ounce shot, and it's got all kinds of stuff in it. Matcha is one of the primary ingredients. So you're probably familiar with matcha.
Yeah.
And so matcha, what it does that's different is that tea caffeines, like caffeines from herbal teas and especially green and black teas, they actually release in your system. Your body metabolizes them slower. And so it's like a steady, more long-term stream of energy and focus. And so not only did they put matcha in it, which also boosts your metabolism, by the way, they put all kinds of adaptogens and nootropics in it. And so it feeds your brain, and it enables you to process stress with a total calm chill. And so anyways, you know that our life has been crazy this last week. I've been drinking it this last week, and I think that's part of why I've stayed super chill. And so
Come on.
I know, it's been so great.
Wow.
So anyways, go ahead.
I was going to say too, and I'm kind of in this, regaining some of my health and losing weight. But I remember when you said cortisol, I was like, wait a minute, cortisol affects my weight, and it also helps with that, and helps with my metabolism and everything. Then that helps me shift, get a little bit of that extra leg up that I need to stay healthy.
Exactly. So if you want to check it out, or any of my listeners, if you want to check it out, this company was very sweet. They gave me a special discount code for my friends, so that you guys could get either 50% off of a subscription, which is like huge, or 20% off of a one-time purchase of their product to try it out or whatever. It's all natural. It's got like 12 different ingredients in it, but it's all natural. So it blesses your body, and it builds your brain too. The neural stuff in the brain, it totally rebuilds all of that. And so you could go to magicmind.com/Java with Jen and use my code JWJ20. And all of that is in the show notes. So if you're interested, pop in there and go check it out. But anyways, I had to tell you about it because it's just super amazing.
Let's get it.
I know, right? Okay, so let's get into our topic, fear-based leadership. So there are 8 different things that you wanted to share, and tell us really kind of in a summary, or like what brought you to researching this topic, and why is this something you wanted to teach people about?
Yeah, so I'll go one scripture and one story, and I'll try to do them quick enough so that we have time to get this in.
Okay.
The scripture where it really came from is John chapter 9. And as I was going through reading that, just my own personal study one day, I just began to see all these instances where leaders in the story were operating from trying to keep people in fear. And I was like, why are they trying to keep people in? Why are they going at it this way? And then realized, oh, they've got fear in their own life, and that's where this is coming from. And so that's why they're operating that way. And so I read through the whole thing, and I'm like, that is so. And so there's like 8 things that stood out to me that these leaders exemplified and did that. But when I was thinking about it, I remember I used to work for Academy Sporting Goods, Academy Sports and Outdoors now, whatever. But I worked at the original store in Pasadena, Texas. And at one point, I was a department head, and we had a manager who was pretty hard-nosed. And he was cool a lot of time, but then every once in a while, if you tripped his trigger, it was like boom, and it blew. And so I remember being in the store one night after we closed, and he had asked everybody that was over the different departments and everything, get these areas lined up, pull all the products to the front of the shelves, do all those things, make it look right. And he walked down this aisle, and it was not, and he always had to check everything to make sure it was ready for the next day. And I remember him walking down there and looking at this aisle that had not been done well. And he blew up, and he took his hand and he started at one end of the aisle and just raked everything off of the shelves onto the floor. He was pulling stuff off of pegs onto the floor, just throwing it all. He's like, look at this. This is junk. He's like, start over and do it right, kind of deal. And boy, people jumped, and they got in there, and they got that thing looking awesome. Well, I was left in charge one night to close the store, and there was an aisle that wasn't right. And so I saw what my leader did, and people responded. And so I did it. And people didn't respond as well. They ended up doing a pretty good job, but they went and told the leader what I had done. And he's like, he couldn't say a lot because he had done it. But I learned, because fear was created in me, then I started to lead out of that same fear. And I realized this is not a good plan.
No,
it's not right. This doesn't work like that. And especially in the body of Christ, it doesn't, it's not, this is true. This stuff is true. It doesn't matter whether somebody listening is faith-based or not. They could be in the business world, and all of this would be absolutely true. Even though I took it from a story in scripture, all these things are true, but especially for those of us who call ourselves believers, this is really this is not okay. And so it's like, well, then we need to be able to identify it and deal with it. And how do we correct it? And how do we come back from that if we've been operating out of this?
Yeah, that's so good. And I told my husband the other day, I've been doing so much research the last few years, actually, on mental health and emotional health, and what makes healthy, safe people, and what makes unhealthy, unsafe people. And I told my husband, I said, babe, across the board, it comes down to 2 things. Healthy, safe people are driven by love and faith and an abundance mentality. Unhealthy, unsafe people are driven by fear and by scarcity. That's what it all in the universe comes down to. Like, everything comes down to it. And so scripture is so clear about how we should respond to fear. And so those who are listening, I want you to listen to this, because whether you're a parent, whether you're a boss, whether you have a boss, whether you have just friends, in some measure, every one of us carry influence and are a leader in some capacity. And so the principles he's going to share here are totally relevant no matter where you find yourself. If you're a parent, this is super relevant. If you're a boss, if you have a boss, learning how to deal with people, this is super relevant. So let's jump into the first one. It says leadership by fear. If they're a fear-based leader, they must have everything blank to the leader for either their approval or their disapproval. Fill that in for us.
Yeah. Everything's submitted to the leader for their approval or disapproval. Gotta have their thumb in every pot. Nobody gets to make a decision that isn't run by the leader. Man, it's a funnel. Everything funnels back to the leader. You don't make a decision on your own. You bring that to me and I decision. You don't schedule anything on the calendar without running it by me. You don't ask anybody to do anything without making sure with me that it's okay that you ask them to do all that stuff. And in John chapter 9, we see, and the whole quick story is that Jesus heals a man who was born blind. He heals him, and the people in the town there report that to the religious leaders, and the religious leaders they're hunting Jesus, but they're trying to find reasons and ways to get to him. But instead of bringing him in, they bring this guy in that got healed. He didn't do anything, just got healed.
Yeah.
And they started interrogating him, go through all this, and then they bring his parents in, and and then finally when they're done, they're like, get out, like this is their whole thing is frustrated, but this whole deal deals around fear. And for them, those people, it says that the people in the community thought, we better take this to the leaders that this happened, because what they had created among people was this sense of, you never let anything happen without bringing it to us. And man, that just narrows everything down so much. Now people are afraid to do anything on their own, instead of being released in leadership and leadership expanding and more being accomplished. Just like you were talking about, God's about more and greater, and let's expand and let's exponentially. His kingdom is about that. And instead, when everything has to run through one leader, everything bottlenecks.
Yeah.
And you can't get anything done. And then everybody's afraid to even make any decision.
Yeah.
Should we put the toilet paper over or under? Could somebody just put the toilet paper out there so people have it? Whatever,
Right.
But if it's all got to run through you, and you're going to blow up if people didn't, come and tell you, and let you in on that, then man, you got a problem.
And honestly, when you're under a leader that acts like that, it'll probably feel oftentimes like control and micromanaging, right?
Absolutely.
That's what that kind of produces.
Yeah, for sure. They gotta, they'll say, would you do this? And there's an illustration of somebody one time that a minister, that they had said, they asked somebody in church, would you take care of this? It was like painting something or whatever. Would you take care of that? And so they come back and they're like, hey, so I picked out these colors and we're going to do this and this. And they're like, no, scrap all that. I want it to be this and this and this and this. Well, either you could have said that at the beginning and just said, hey, I'd like it to be this and this. Could you go take care of it? Or praise God, somebody was taking care of it, and you just let it go and go, awesome. I didn't have to do it. I love this.
Exactly. Right. Okay. So leadership by fear leadership by fear must have everything submitted to the leader for their approval or disapproval. Okay. That's the first one. Right. Second one, leadership by fear looks for blank, like the leader's own. What is that?
Opinions like the leader's own. So this is, leaders who are leading out of fear, they're worried that things are going to get away from them. And so they try to surround themselves with people who are yes people, yes men, yes women. They're looking for those people who will validate them and their opinions and their ways. And if you don't, you're an outlier and I don't pick you and you're not going to be on the team and all those things. I only create that. And then so we're always campaigning we're always working trying to get somebody that's going to see it the way I see it. And so that's what these spiritual leaders did. They were like, okay, you need to comply with our opinion about this. This is what happened, isn't it? And so they're trying to get this guy to say, isn't this what happened? Isn't this what happened? Be a yes man. Be a person who goes along and does what we say you should do. And the guy's going, I don't know what to tell you. All I know is I was blind and now I can see. Yeah. And they're going, yeah, but wasn't it like this? And they try to get you to be on their side of things. And it's always from a fear-based leader, because they're afraid if there's other opinions, I might not get my way. I might not. And these fears are there for a reason. I mean, they've had things that have happened in their life. Those fears are in their own lives for a reason, and they're operating that way. But they're afraid of other opinions. They're afraid of that. what if it gets away? What if I'm not viewed as the leader anymore?
Mm.
And somebody else is viewed as the leader. And that's just not healthy.
Yeah.
And so I love, like with our board here at the church, they all have strong opinions that they are more than willing to share, because we've tried to create a safe place for them to
Mm.
do that. And I've told them, tell me if I'm missing something, like share
Yeah.
that, so I don't make a bad decision. I want to make the best decision, and the best decision is an educated decision with all the perspectives that we can possibly get. Do that. But somebody who's leading out of fear is not going to see that. They're going to go, no, no, no. Everybody just needs to look at it the same way and go along with me.
Right. And that does produce, again, like a climate of control and lack of freedom, lack of space. In fact, I have a friend who's a therapist, and she said that when we engage in conversation with people who challenge our perspective and have opposing viewpoints, it actually helps your brain develop. Like, it actually helps because it creates new neural pathways in your brain. So it actually develops your intelligence. It develops your empathy and the ability to see things from another perspective. It's really important for our sense of healthy humanity to engage intentionally with other perspectives. And so,
yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Okay. So that was leadership by fear looks for others' opinions to be the same as their own. Okay. Yeah. Number 3, leadership by fear controls the blank, making the facts conform to their opinion. What is that?
Control the narrative. And if you follow politics in any way, you understand we call it spin, right? In politics, we call it, how am I going to spin this to look like? So in the John chapter 9 thing, they're saying Jesus heals a man who's been born blind. And so they want to bring his parents in and say, this guy wasn't really blind. He wasn't blind from birth, like everybody's saying. Really, it's just a guy who, he couldn't see things far off. Things were just kind of blurry. I mean, they're trying to reshape the narrative to say it wasn't a miracle, right? They want the guy, they want his parents, they want everybody to kind of conform to their narrative of this is really what happened. What really, and whenever you hear people start using that terminology, well, what really happened? Always take that with a grain of salt, because there could be some narrative shaping that's going on, and they want to conform the facts to that. It says they still refuse to believe the man had been born blind and could now see. Like that's just not their narrative. It's not going to be that way. So now they got to figure out, how do I spin this to be that? And I've told people before, I'm like, man, I've served in roles where I had to put out fires and relationally, with people in ministry and things like that. And so what's the best way to couch this conversation, but wrestle within myself to say, hey, don't spin this. It is what it is. But how do you do it kindly? How do you do whatever, and figure out a way to get, and there's a difference between
the motive is the difference.
Yeah. So anyway,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your sentence. I feel like
I was just going to say they want to control that narrative. There's a difference when you want to spin it and say, but so what you're really trying to say is this, right? Yeah. Instead of, hey, what really happened, and let's get the facts. The facts don't matter to folks who are leading from fear. The message, get my message out the way I want it to get out. And that's why I say politics is great, because you can get some mud slung at one politician and they say, well, I know they said that happened years ago in my life, and yes, but you have to understand the context and this and this and this, and what really happened was, and why that's important is, and we all look at that and we go, come on, man. Like, we know what you're doing. We get it. And that happens when you see a fear-based leader doing that stuff. It's obvious, and you kind of go, that's disingenuous. I'm not buying it.
I think that's one of the filters, because Jesus does tell us, he's like, speak the truth in love, so
Right.
there is a filter that we have to apply that is godly. But I think what becomes ungodly and falls into the area what you're talking about is when our filter changes the truth and our filter becomes deceptive. Because, even with my kids, with some of the stuff that we've gone through recently, we've had to tell them like, hey, listen, if people ask you a bunch of questions, here's what you have the freedom to say. But we're like, don't get off into sharing all your thoughts, because then all these rumors will come from it, and so we're trying to guard them and keep them and teach them how to use wisdom in what they say, but it's not changing the facts, and
Exactly.
so I feel like that's kind of the fine line between the two.
Absolutely.
And so that's good. Okay, so that was leadership by fear controls the narrative, making the facts conform to their opinion. Number 4 is leaders who lead by fear can't admit they are wrong.
Wrong. Yeah,
Okay.
they can't admit they're wrong. I love
Right.
it. You remember Fonzie on the Happy Days? Are you old
Yeah.
enough to remember? You ever watched any reruns?
Thank you for calling me young. I appreciate that.
Hey, see, you know what? But he, like Fonzie on Happy Days, would always, when he had to admit that, he would say, I was, and they're like, just say it. I was, he's like, he finally wrong, he spit it out, and they're like, come here, give me a hug, and they work it out or whatever. I was super blessed to have a dad who in my life who had the ability to admit that he was wrong and apologize. We disagreed plenty of times. We were so much alike that we drove each other nuts or whatever, or we just looked at life in different perspectives. And sometimes, and I remember my dad would not, this may not make sense to anybody listening nowadays. We were not allowed to go to a movie theater and watch movies growing up. That was just part of the religious thing. We didn't do that. There's sinful things that are shown in a movie theater or whatever. We're not going and we're not doing that. And if the rapture takes place, you're not going, you hit your head on the ceiling, all that stuff. Okay. And so, and it literally told me, anyway, I couldn't go see Bambi with the school when they went. Okay, so like that's the level of don't go to the movies.
Yeah.
And then after the boys were born and grew up, when I moved away, we made our own decisions, and we would only go to good movies, but we would go to the movie theater and watch them, right? And I'm still saved, believe it or not. So but one Christmas, my dad goes, "Hey, I got a surprise for y'all." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "We're taking y'all to the movies." And I was like, what?
Did you lose your Christianity, Dad?
I was like, Dad, like how? And I was like, and I don't know if he was 70, I don't know, he was about 80 maybe, I don't know. He's in late 70s, early 80s. Anyway, and this was a few years before he passed away, and I was like, I can't do that to you. I can't make you. He goes, I said, why are you doing this? I don't understand. You've always said no. And so, because here I am, a grown adult, I'm going, I don't know how to rationalize this. And he goes, I was wrong. And he goes, there are some good things that you could go and watch, and I see that now. But anyway, but he had that ability all through the years. So I'd experienced that, just not with that particular thing. And I knew it. And I appreciate that, because it's helped me as a husband, as a dad, all those kind of things. In fact, when Angela and I got married, we set a rule that said, if we have a disagreement and you take a hard stand on something, you go, no, it's this way, and you're proven wrong, you have to out loud, you have to say, you were right, and you can't stop there. You have to say, and I was wrong. And then I added over the years, I'm sorry, will you please forgive me? You have to say it. And that's the rule. And so after a few times, it didn't take too long for me doing that to not take as hard a stand anymore and go, you know what? I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to be the guy that has to say I was wrong all the time.
Yeah.
I would rather say somebody else could have a right opinion. I could be wrong about this.
Yeah.
I don't think I am, but I could be.
Yeah.
But leaders who lead by fear can't admit they're wrong.
Wow.
Because if they admit they're wrong, then that they feel like that's a chink in their armor, that's a crack, they're not good leaders. If I'm wrong, then then nobody will want to follow me. And there's all these faulty, flawed thoughts that come to our minds. People will think I'm weak. People will think I'm not a good leader. They'll think all these things. So I can't, if they admit they're wrong, they can't do it. And so that one is huge, huge, huge. And the leaders won't. In verse 18, they still refused to believe that the man had been healed.
Wow.
They can't
That's
admit they're
crazy.
wrong.
That's crazy. That's a good insight. I appreciate that one. Okay. Number 5, leadership by fear manipulates people into following by control.
Threat.
Oh.
Either you do this or else. I joke with people all the time. I'm like, let me tell you something. Y'all better show up at church next Sunday, or I'm going to come find y'all and break your kneecaps. Okay. Now, obviously, I'm joking. I'm not the mafia. I'm not coming out with a baseball bat and showing up at people's house and break their kneecaps. They know I'm joking. Right. But there are leaders who they are not joking. Do this or else. Do this or your job is over. Do this or else you won't get the promotion. Do this or you either go my way, you either go along, you go along to get along. And, you know, and so either you do it or else you won't get that bonus. You won't get your raise. You won't. And it doesn't matter what the threat is. The threat could be, you know, you're not going to have a job here anymore. Or it could be, and I've had that happen. I've had a leader say to me, well, if you don't want to do this, I suppose that you're going to want to go look for another position. And you
low-key passive-aggressive threat.
You go, okay. All right. You know, and when it comes to this story in John 9, it says that they called his parents in to ask him, and it says his parents said, you need to ask him. He's an adult. He can answer for himself. And this is what verse 22 says. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. In other words, if you admit this guy worked a miracle, we're going to kick you out of church.
Wow.
And that's just threat. You know?
And there's so much we could continue to unfold in these. And I'm like, okay. So because I'm like, okay, because, you know, healthy boundaries also has a consequence attached, you know, like if you keep yelling at me, I will be removing myself from that. But I think the difference is in healthy boundaries, the consequence focuses on what I will do, not what I will do to you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's the difference there.
It's not punishment to you. It's like, hey, I just got to do this. And that may have consequences for you, but I'm not trying to create those consequences. I'm trying to restore the relationship. I'm trying to make this work.
Right. And it focuses on self-control. Okay. So when someone leadership by fear manipulates people into following by threat. Okay. When someone opposes a leader who leads by fear, blank is the response of that leader. Anger. Man.
Fear is the path to the dark side.
Yes,
leads to anger, right? Yoda told us. Like, I mean, we understand, you know, Star Wars taught us something, but when you get afraid, what happens is it's like backing a hurt animal into a corner. What do? They come out fighting. Because they feel like they're having to protect. And that's what a fear-based leader is. They're always trying to protect. They're always going, I've got all this that I've got to keep, you know, like, and really they've gotten hurt somewhere along the way, or they've gotten damaged along the way, or somebody did them wrong. Somebody raked everything off the shelves toward them. And so now they are having that they don't know how to, I don't want this to happen again. How do I protect myself? And so when you back them into a corner and you just say, I disagree with that. They go, oh, you disagree? Bam, you know, and they blow a gasket. And what they're hoping is if I come out big, the other person will back down.
They become a bully.
And so they're like, I just got to get this out. I got to go big enough. And there's got to be enough explosion that scares them. And so again, now you're leading by fear. You're going, I want to create fear in your life by blowing up on you so that you will not challenge me anymore. And I want to beat you down so that I feel stronger about myself. And see, I was better, I was stronger,
Mm.
only the strong survive, and you're weak, and now you're nothing, and all that. And all that does is belittle people. All that does
It's
is,
abusive.
yeah, it's abusive. People get hurt by it, and they go, you know what? That's fine. I don't want your leadership,
Yeah.
and that's what these guys do. When his parents tell those religious leaders, they're like, he's an adult, ask him. They're like,
Yeah,
boom,
true.
what did you say to us? How dare you? Do you
Yeah.
not know who we are and what power we have? And,
Yeah.
like, come on, man. Anyway, so that's that one. Okay.
You sound like my kids. Come on, man.
Come
Okay, let's
on,
hit
man.
the last two because you have an antidote and I don't want to miss that. Okay. So
Yep.
leaders who lead by fear, blank people who won't conform.
Yeah. What you got? You got anything?
Manipulate?
Label. They label
Oh,
people who won't they do manipulate them too.
yeah,
Manipulation is a huge part of this whole thing,
it's
but
true.
they label people who
Mhm.
won't come, and they do that with this guy and his parents in the story. And he's like, they're like, but what about this? But what about this? Well, and they're like, you just like, you don't know. And they're like, hey, we're not a sinner like you. you
Oh,
know
that's true. They're labeling.
and they're labeling. What they're trying to say is, you're not spiritual and we are,
Mm.
and so therefore you bad, me good.
Mhm.
And that's what leaders who lead by fear, if you won't conform
Wow.
with me, then I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell everybody else, well, you're
Yeah.
just a rebel. You just have a bad attitude. You're just like to start trouble everywhere you go.
Mhm.
And it's just label, label, label,
Yeah.
label. And it's really an attack. And again, these are all attempts to control.
Uh-huh.
These are
Yeah.
all attempts to try to force other people into, and that's the problem. Leadership by fear actually works
Mhm.
temporarily. It
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
People will respond and do temporarily.
Yeah.
After a while, they've had enough, and they're
Right.
like, I'm out of here.
Right. If they're
I don't have
healthy.
to. Yeah, if they're healthy. Otherwise, they just live in abusive situations and
Yeah.
just get, and sometimes they love you and they want that. I mean, that's why
Mhm.
we in marriages, sometimes you'll have
Mhm.
a husband who abuses a wife, and she'll stay. She loves him so much, and she
Mhm.
wants to see the best in him and try,
Yeah.
and yet, but people will label. And so when you hear a leader start calling people names,
Yeah.
they're leading by fear.
That's
If
true.
Because they're like, well, you got, and in church world, we have terminology that we use, that's
Yeah.
catchphrases for, you're bad, you're evil, you
Mhm.
do wrong, you're a rebel, all that stuff. And I won't get into all those,
Yeah.
but
You're the
anyway.
devil. You have a spirit of witchcraft. You are a
Exactly.
Jezebel. You are
Yeah.
taking my job, all the things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all there. Okay, so that's leaders who lead by fear, label people who won't conform. Man, as
Yep.
you're talking, I'm like, I have all these real life scenarios playing out in my
I
head.
know, right?
I'm
Well,
like,
these are,
oh,
I got them too, man. And most of us do. Most of us
yep.
do.
Okay, so the last one, when a leader who leads by fear can no longer manipulate or control followers, they blank and blank them. What is that?
They reject and dismiss them. And
Ah,
so in the story, when they have done everything they can to manipulate this guy and twist the story and get him to conform and get his parents to conform and get everybody else to conform, and can't, everybody get on our side and do this thing. When they're like, I don't know what to tell you. I was blind and now I can see. I don't know what you
uh-huh.
want to do with it. I don't know who the guy is. I was blind and then he touched me and now I can see. I was just
Mhm.
so excited. I didn't stop to go, hey, what's your name? You know?
Right.
And so I'm like, yeah, should I? Probably. I should probably go find the guy and thank him,
Yeah.
but no, I don't know who he is. And so when they won't go along, they say, you were born a total sinner. And then they threw him out of the synagogue.
Wow.
They're like, you know what? Get out of here. And
Wow.
they kick him to the curb. And of course, in the church where we go, wait a minute, isn't this supposed to be the place where sinners come
Uh-huh.
and stuff gets fixed and God makes them right? And we're supposed to be part of that process and
Yeah.
help. But leaders who lead by fear, and so obviously in the church we go, that didn't work. That's not a good
Yeah.
plan. But even in the business world, what happens eventually? If you don't do it the way that I want you to, and I try to manipulate you, and I try to control you, and I try to do all those things, and you are strong enough to stand through all of my abuse, I will realize I can't control you. I can't manipulate you. I can't make you. You're not going to follow my leadership. You know what? Well, then I can't have you here. I have to get rid of you because now you're a threat to me.
Right.
And so I'm going to kick you to the curb. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Right.
You know, and that's the only way a leader who leads by fear, when they realize there's somebody else they can't control, that's their only option.
Yeah.
Because what else are they going to do? Now they have to surrender their right as the leader, and they're so afraid of losing that.
Yeah. And I've seen how some leaders that operate like that, they have kind of an attitude of people are disposable. I'll just fire them and hire another one, where God's heart is discipleship. And because God even does have boundaries that he lays out for us, Matthew 18 and other places where he's like, if someone's sinning against you, confront them, bring a witness. If they still won't repent, then put them out and have nothing to do with them. You know, so there is a place for removal and breaking fellowship if the relationship is toxic and there's no potential for change. But someone who operates in a spirit of fear, that's their go-to. They're like, I just don't want to deal with it, or just go, you know, and you're dispensable. And so it really, again, it comes down to the spirit that it's done in and the attitude that it's done in.
Yeah, for sure. And all of this leads to, I mean, when you look at all those, you go, man, this person is manipulative, they're controlling, they've got all this, and they have dealt with all this in their life. They've probably had people do that to them. And that's why they're so afraid. And it's the only model they see or know. It's the only one that the only way they know how to function. And yet the beauty is the cure for all of this is the opposite. And that is the cure, the antidote to avoid leading by fear is to lead from a place of love.
Yes.
And the reason I say it's the opposite is because in 1 John 4:18, so John, same guy who told this story about what happened with Jesus and the blind man and the religious leaders, writes in a letter later, and he's lived longer than any of the other apostles. So this is on down the road. He's writing to other believers and going, hey, let me help coach you through a few things about following Jesus and what it means and what it looks like. And when it comes to the way that he says, in 1 John 4:18, God's perfect love casts out all fear. Now we use that real generically and real generally, but what he's talking about is judgment. He's like, you don't have to be afraid of God because God's perfect love for you. If you really know his love and his heart for you, then you'll know that love is going to remove the fear of judgment. You're not going to have to stand before him and worry about judgment because you know you've already worked things out in love with him.
Wow.
And so the same is true. So he's really talking about judgment, and that's what fear-based leadership all has to do with, is this whole judgment element. And so when we've got, the problem is we've got fear in our life, we've got to get it out as leaders and replace that with love. Because whatever is in us when we're tipped over is what's going to spill out. And so if I live out of fear, if I live a life out of fear, just like you were talking about scarcity and all those things, then I have no ability to operate out of anything. Whatever I got is what I'm going to lead out of. And so, but if I can get that out, deal with it, and then replace that, fill myself up with love. And God's love, the love of others, healthy relationships, and all those things. Now, when I come to somebody, I can deal, really, you could flip every one of those and have a different response. When somebody leads out of love, it looks like this. When somebody leads out of love, it looks like this. When somebody leads out of love, it looks like this. And had those leaders responded in love with this guy instead of out of fear, how different would that story have been?
Wow. And see, this is your next book. You write the book that talks about the leading out of fear, and then you have, here's what it looks like to lead out of love. There you go. You're welcome. Helping you reach your book goals.
I only need more time to write. That's it.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Well, and you're right. Like fear, the opposite of fear is love. And I know that whenever I'm in situations where, because all of us demonstrate this at some point, in some capacity, and we have to confront it in ourselves, right? Part of maturing and growing in the Lord is that we step away from fear and walk in love, right? And so I have found that times when I'm inclined towards anger or control or whatever, which is not common, but it's still, I'm human and it still happens, you know. If I stop myself and think to myself, okay, how would I want to be treated if the roles were reversed? That is usually my magic sauce for finding a better response, you know, and it pulls me out of fear and control and pulls me into compassion and empathy. And I want what's good for them, which is a posture of love. And it helps me find a better response in that moment.
And that's the Holy Spirit helping you. The fruit of the Spirit is love, right? Love, joy, peace, patience. I mean, that's the first one in the list, right?
Yeah,
it's
true.
love. And when you say, how would I want to be treated if I was in their shoes? What you just did was love them. You cared enough about them to say, if I was in their shoes, I would want somebody to treat me like this. You stopped, and that's love, but it doesn't always come immediately for everybody. That's a learned, I mean, it's a leadership skill. I mean, there's so much, you know, talk about EQ, knowing your emotional quotient nowadays, and leadership to know. And part of that, some of it I look at it and go, yeah, if you just follow what scripture says, it's so easy. It's right there. Oh my goodness. Okay. But you know, but yeah, to have that love and really care about the other person. And that's the deal. You know, when a leader loves you, you know, when they're looking after your best interest, you know, when they're looking after the best interest of everyone, and they can't give you what you want right now, but you know, it's because they really care about everybody. You go, I get it, you know, and they're going to try to work that out with you. But you know, it's such a different, and you've probably seen both those leaders in your life.
Yep.
I've been both those leaders.
Yeah. Yep. That too.
That's the problem. I've been both of them, and I go, you know, and finally I'm like, if anybody's going to ever accuse me of anything, I want it to be that guy loved too much.
Yeah.
He was too soft.
Yeah.
He was too kind. He thought too much about what other people needed and wanted and all that. I'm like, I'll take that. I don't want to be these guys and them going, he's such a jerk.
Right.
Like, why can't he just for once admit he was wrong? Why can't he just let somebody else be on the team? Why can't he, you know, I'd rather them go, why can't that guy just bow up a little bit sometimes, you know?
Right. No, that's so good. Okay, so I'm gonna say all of these through again, just as a recap. But
Perfect.
as you listeners are listening, think through which one of these maybe is more your Achilles heel, you know, that you're like, oh, I do that the most, you know, and just take that and say, you know what, Lord, thank you that you give grace for us to become what we are not as though we were, and present it to the Lord and say, God, show me how to replace this pattern with love. Cause I'm reading through all these. I'm like, oh, my parenting can use a little more love. Okay, so the first one, everything must be submitted to the leader for their approval. Leadership by fear looks for opinions like their own. Leadership by fear controls the narrative, making the facts conform to their opinion. Leaders who lead by fear cannot admit they're wrong. Leaders by fear manipulate people into following them by threats. When someone opposes a leader who leads by fear, anger is the response of that leader. Leaders who lead by fear label people who won't conform. And when a leader who leads by fear can no longer manipulate or control followers, they reject and dismiss them. But the antidote to all of this is leaning into love, leaning into the grace of God. He knows that we are weak and we are but dust. He knows. And that's the whole point of grace is like, hey, you don't got what it takes, but I do. So let me come help you out, you know? So lean into the Lord, lean into grace for this. But if you have a leader in your life who operates in these things, some of you guys may be having light bulb moments where you're like, whoa, I just realized I've been living in the matrix, you know, and you just realize this is what I've been enduring. I want to encourage you. Leadership that leads by fear is not healthy, and exposed to it in a prolonged period of time does begin to destroy your heart and your mind. It is abusive at its core. And if they're not willing to be repentant and to change, you probably need to remove yourself from that environment so that you can protect the health of your own heart and mind. I've had to do that myself in other situations, and I always am grateful that I did. I'm always grateful that I protected the health of my own heart. So I just want to encourage those of you, if it's a boss, if it's a spouse, if it's a family member, boundaries are necessary, and you need to be able to hold your boundaries to protect your own heart and your own mind.
Yeah, just speak release over that right now. I had somebody
Yeah.
speak that in my life one time. We were in an unhealthy situation like that with a leader who led by fear.
Mm,
And I remember them saying to me, you don't have kids, but if you did, and you knew that they were going to grow up in this environment, would you want them to stay there because they're going to become like that if they stay there?
right.
They're going to pick all that up and do that. I'd say absolutely not. And this guy very kindly looked at me and said, Alan, you are somebody's child,
Mm,
and your parents would not want you to stay in this because
yeah.
they don't want you to grow up and be this.
Yeah.
Because I know you're an adult, but you get what I'm saying. And I
Yeah.
said, yes, sir. And it was the permission we needed in that moment to walk away from a scenario that it was unhealthy, but we didn't know how to get out of it. And we
Yeah.
just needed somebody to say, it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay in that. And so I just want to speak that over somebody right now who's listening,
Mm,
who you need somebody to give you permission, and your parents don't want you to stay in this. I don't even know. Your parents may not be alive. You may have had
yeah.
horrible parents. I don't know. But God doesn't want you to live abused.
Yeah.
And he just gives you permission right now
Mm,
to step away from that, even if it's temporarily, or if it's permanently and you need
mm.
to get out. And because if it's not going to change, then it's okay. It's safe for you to get out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're not meant to live subject to the sin of others. The word of God is very clear that we're to address when people are sinning against us. And if they're not repentant, we're to break fellowship with them, because your first priority is to guard your heart, guard your mind, guard your spirit, and to live in a healthy space like that. Okay, Alan, thank you so much for sharing all of this. We've come to the end of our time, but you guys, this was so good. Share it on social media, because I know there's lots of people that are probably going to find some epiphanies as they're listening, and maybe some conviction, and maybe realize they need to make some changes in situations in their life. And the truth sets people free. And so you guys share this episode. If you want to connect with Alan, he's got a number of books online, and you can connect with him over at allenchapin.com.
That's it.
That's it. allenchapin.com. Is there anything that you want to share with the listeners for them to come check out?
Oh man, I just and I don't. This is probably too late for this. I'll have to get it for next year. Just released a Christmas book, Christmas devotional. It was so fun,
Uh-huh.
and so, but more coming, and really a couple books this year, Lord willing, that are more geared toward leading within the church world, those kind of things. But one of them is about communication. And
Mm,
it would applies to anybody who's preacher, teacher, whatever. If you stand in front of people and communicate, I'm going to give a model that's going to help you frame everything in the way that you communicate, so that people can grab hold of it,
mm.
and you can communicate effectively to people what it is that's in your heart, or what you need to get to them, whether it's in a business setting or in a church setting or whatever. So
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Alan, for coming on here again. And you guys,
absolutely, thanks for having me.
it's such a blessing to have you every time. And so you guys, make sure you go connect with Alan at allenchapin.com. That link will be down in the show notes. Make sure that you're following Java with Jen wherever you listen to your podcast, so that you don't miss any new episodes. I love to have my guests on in a repeat manner, and I'm about to jump on another interview with another repeat guest. And it's just a blessing to get to know them. So make sure you're subscribed. You may hear from Alan again. And come follow me at Instagram, Java with Jen. Share this with a friend, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. Listen, let's stay connected. Come follow me on Instagram at Java with Jen, where you can follow the latest and say hey. It's a really great way to stay in touch. Many of you have also asked how you can support the show. You can make donations through the Anchor app or on Patreon, or of course by sharing, rating, and reviewing on social media and iTunes as well. Your heartfelt feedback always reminds me why I do this. Also, don't miss our merch store, where you can get super cool Java with Jen swag and coffee. Find it at javawithjenmerch.com. Until next time, remember, hearing God's voice is simple, and He wants to be a part of your everyday life. See you next week.